Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So my name is Milan and this is the Learn to Code Python programming series. So in today's video we're going to be looking at utilizing lists in our programming techniques. So what is a list is the first question. Well, a list can contain a number of data types, so that means it can hold strings, integers, you name it, you can stick it in a list. In a list, an item is referred to as an element. Each of these elements have index numbers, similar to the way we've been working with strings and manipulating them. You can reference index number 2, which is the third item in the list, and this could be a integer, double, string, you name it, and it can be that. The same with strings. Indexing in lists begins with 0, so that's something to bear in mind. And the same with strings as well. Indexes can use negative numbers. So if you wanted to access the last item in a list, you can just do -1. So the first real question is how do you make a list? Well, if we hop over to idle here, you can see I've already opened up a script window. So what we're going to do is initialize a list. So I'm going to call it my list is equal to these square brackets. These square brackets are basically just creation of a list. Now, say I wanted to fill this list with some elements. What I would do is 1, 2, 3, and that is a list now containing the elements 1, 2, and 3. So, similar to manipulating strings, if I wanted to print out the first element in a list, what I'm going to do is write my list, and then we will do square brackets and 0. So that 0 there is basically going to reference the number 1 in this instance. And I can do print my list -1, and that's going to reference the 3 in this instance. Now I can also do print my list 0 to 1, which will print out the first 2, and that's all there is really to how do you manipulate a list. Let's add some more elements here just for the sake of an example, and then let's change this from 1 to 3. Now if I was to run this code, so I'm just going to call this test_7, you can see there that we are printing the elements 1, last one which is 5 in this instance, and 1 to 3, which is 2 to 4. But remember, the last number here does not get printed. Same with strings, so we only print 2 and 3. That is the basics of how to declare a list and how to print some items from the list. So say I wanted to now change this item in the list from being, I don't want 1 there anymore, I want something else. So I would do my list, and then you access the first item in the list, which is obviously index 0, and you then proceed to change this number. So to change this number, what I'm going to do is put a brackets around here and type 6. So what this is basically doing is saying in this list, change this element to a number 6. We can also do the same for changing multiple numbers. So if I did 1 to 3 equals, 8 and 10. So we will now have 6, 8, 10 in my list. And finally, I can also change the last element in the list to be equal to, let's do 12 in this example, or 14 actually, and that will change that number too. So if I was to just copy and paste this down here, you'd expect the answer to print out a changed list. We can also do print my list to print every single element out. So if I run that there, what we've done here is essentially change these numbers. So the next question you guys might have is, why are there brackets around here? So this is a concept I've accidentally introduced, which is having a list inside a list. So the way that works, I was going to explain, is if you reference one list as square brackets, you can reference a second list inside that list. So let's just make a practical example. So if I run this now, you can see that this last element contains 2 elements inside it. So how does that work? Well, if I was to do print my list, and then did -1 to access the last element, and then I did -1 again, this is basically like, it's an inception of sorts, you know, it's nesting things inside each other. So I'm printing the last one of the first list, and then I'm printing the last one of the second list. So the answer should return 16, which it perfectly fine it does in returning that. So if you wanted to just have 6 in there, you would just write 6 on its own, and you're just going to get 6 straight into the list as it was before. So this is how you can edit items in a list after creating a list. So what's a useful way? You could create a list that has people's names in it, and then you can get the user to change their name, for example, if it's been misspelt or something. You can reference that element in the list and edit it, basically. So what else can you do with lists? Well, something you can do is finding the length. So if I was to write length and then my list inside and run that, you would see it returns 5. Now, why does it return 5 and not, 6 in this example? Because you have to remember, the list inside the list is not the top list. So in terms of elements in this list, there's 6, 8, 10, 4. Then there is the list containing 14 and 16. Not 14 and 16 itself. It is the list containing. What else can you do? Well, if I wanted to add an item to my list and make it bigger, I can do mylist.append, and I can basically add the number 18. So this is going to be added to the original list. And if I was to now print my list on that, see 18 has now been added to the end. So append is a very powerful tool. Like in the example of registering your name, you can have a user type their different names in and just append them to the end of the list. So you can use extend. So what this does is it puts another list onto the list to extend the list, essentially, as if that makes sense. So I would have to put my list in here, for example, and we're extending my list with my list. And if I was to run that, you can see it is now stuck the original list onto the end of the list. If that's hard to read, let's call my list 2. I'll have the numbers 20 and 22 in this list. And if I was to run that now, you can see 20 and 22 has been added onto the end of the list. So I'm just flying through these because there's a lot of functions you can do with lists. So the next thing you can do is insert elements. So mylist.insert, and I can put an index here. So you can, what do I mean by index? So say I want to put an element in between 6 and 8. Well, that's going to be the element that you want to put it in. So if I put it at 1, and then I put the item that I want to put in, so say I wanted to, 6 and 8, so we'll put 7 in between, and then if I run print my list and F5 that, you can see 7 has been inserted at this position. Another thing you can do is mylist dot remove, and I can remove any elements. So the way this works is that it will check the list for anything that matches this element and then remove it. So I wanted to remove this 4 that's in the middle right here because it just doesn't fit the pattern. So if I do print my list dot, or if I just print the list now after removing the 4, you can see the 4 has been taken out of its position. Another thing you can do is mylist.pop. So what does popping do? Well, popping essentially removes the last element in the list. So that 22 that we see there is going to be gone now. And what else can you do is mylist.index. So this will tell you where is this number in the list. So this is good for if you're searching through lists to find something. You know, this obviously has to like that, and it should return the number, so it's index number 5 in this instance. So the next thing you can also do is count. So this will return how many times does this particular object occur in the list. So let's just append the list to have another number 6 in it. And then if I was to print my list dot count, number 6 returns 2 now. And then finally, what else we can do? There's a lot of functions you can do with this. I'm just trying to get through all of them that you can use in the future. So another thing you can basically do is reverse the list. So how does that work? Well, if I do, as you can see here, I've already typed it up, is print my list and then print my list.reverse, and it basically, once I print it again, everything is flipped in place where it was. So index -1 is 0. This 20 is now in index number 1, and so on and so forth. So that's the basics of what you can do with lists and an introduction of how to use them. Obviously, they don't have to just hold integers in them. You can hold strings and other stuff as well. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you're enjoying the content so far. Any questions to do with Python, just pop them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.